I want to introduce Brett Kanda. I think I met Brett 3 or 4 years ago at, I believe it was the Nevada Aviation Day down at the legislature in Carson City. We met there first and then had a couple exchanges since then. And it's been like over a year since we've connected. And I attended a workshop the other day where he was present. And I thought, wow, Brett would be a great speaker to come on at a future show to talk about his world, because it's an area we haven't focused on too much. And I think it's an opportunity for a lot of us to really pursue. So Brett, we don't introduce anybody in their career story. That's you. And we've shared this, but we talk a lot about your why, your elevator. So what I want to do is turn it over to you to kind of just go through your journey and whatever you want for the next 22 or 3 minutes. Brett, welcome.
Perfect. Thanks, Pete. Appreciate you having me. So I'm going to gear the next 25 minutes around career development in the autonomous system space or drone space, and specifically the commercial space versus, typical military drones that you would see like a Predator and a Reaper. But and another piece of this is also going to be how you can have pretty much any background imaginable and still have an impact on a new industry in an aerospace industry. You don't have to be an engineer. You don't have to love everything that flies. There's so many ways that you can be creative to have a long-standing career in this industry. And I'm a great example of that. Prior to being in this industry, I played professional golf for a living. So played collegiate golf at UNLV and played professionally for about 4 years. So when I talk about off the beaten path career and a non-traditional career, I'm pretty much the definition of that. But I want to go back to kind of how I got into this industry and where my interest was sparked. Back in 2013, I had a really good friend of mine come to me with the DJI Phantom 1, which is the first product that DJI really ever put out. I'm sure you all have seen it in advertising, marketing, in your park. It is the white quadcopter from DJI, probably the most famous drone in the consumer and commercial market that there is. And my friend came to me and took something that I knew through and through in golf and applied it to the drone industry. Basically said, why are production crews using helicopters to get airborne imagery and video? They're expensive. They are short-lived. They're hard to access. There's a million things why helicopters are a difficult tool to use for airborne, cinematography and videography. And the light bulb just kind of went off then, right? I'm like, I'm holding this 4K camera in my hand that can fly for 30 minutes. Why don't we do that 10 times a day, every day? And it'll be a 15th of the cost of using a helicopter. So that was really my initial kind of step into this. Now, back in 2012, 2013, the drone industry was essentially non-existent. I spent probably a week straight researching what companies were out there, who was out there, who was doing this, where could I potentially go to school, everything you could think of, and I found nothing. So I think that for some of the younger people on here, don't look at something like that as a problem, view that as an opportunity, right? As opposed to saying, oh man, nothing exists, I'm going to stay far away from that. It was an opportunity to step in at the ground level and, also be able to show a little bit of humility and realize that I know nothing about anything that flies. I know nothing about business. And those were the two things that I've kind of fallen in love with, but from, absolutely no foundation at the age of about 23, 24. So I completely dove in head first. I said, basically, hey, we're all starting at the same, level here. There's nobody real advanced, and I'm excluding the military again. I'm talking about the commercial world of drones, and basically starting at the same place as everybody else. And one of the most important things, I know that everybody here has a passion for aviation, but ensuring that you go in 100% to whatever you're going to do is kind of a rule of thumb in anything, and especially if you like it. It's going to be a tough career path for any of you that end up doing something that, number one, you don't enjoy, and number one, that you're not 100% committed to. So I fell in love with this cool, basically, flying robot. And where I wanted to approach it, I knew that I wasn't an engineer. I knew that I didn't want to approach it from wanting to build them. I knew that I was interested in the business side. So you take an industry, you have to look at all the different ways that you can work within that industry, whether it be engineering, whether it be assembly, technician, marketing aviation, selling aviation. There's so many different ways to approach this. And I knew that I wanted to approach it from the business perspective. So when I made that commitment, I essentially knew that I was going to go into this saying, okay, what can drones be used for? How can they provide return on investment to end users? How can you apply this new technology into changing old industries? So every way that I looked at the industry was from that lens of the business side. So for about 3.5 years, I started a company and had a drone service provider. So we grew to about 15 people or so. But essentially what we would do is go to production companies and say, hey, how are you guys getting your aerial video now? And typically it's either we're using a really big crane, which is expensive and hard to use and limited, or we're using a helicopter. So it's like, okay, well, that's probably a good initial market. I'm just going to call every production company I know and say, hey, we're offering drone services, right? Figure out how to price that, and figure out how to provide a legal service. This was back when there were no regulation around drone operations. So it was truly the Wild West. And so we were able to establish kind of a business model and a business plan around drone services, right? So some of the use cases that we were doing and some of the projects that we were working on over a 3.5 period were absolutely production, right? So any type of video content, we would show up and fly drones, 4K cameras, everything that you need built into a DJI drone that's applicable for cinematography and production, but also commercial real estate. So we found a lot of business with commercial real estate companies that were developing a piece of land, and they would love an aerial video around that 5 to 10 acre site and put 3D renderings of what the future building is going to look like. Makes sense, right? They are definitely not a group of people that are going to hire a helicopter to come in and do that type of thing. So we were able to go out one day, fly around a site, go into post-production, and 2 days later, give them a 4-minute video of their entire site, of the life cycle of what's going to happen on, to that piece of land, as well as that building. That's one example. So the drone industry has really turned into a few different things. Number one is cinematography and production. Number two is data analytics. And when I say data analytics, I mean taking all of this imagery that you collect from the air, stitching it together and extracting important information. Now, a great example of this is construction sites. So today, I take that back. Back then, what would have to happen is a registered land surveyor would have to get in his truck. He'd have to drive around that site. There's going to be areas that he can't get to, and he's going to have to go through a process that takes him anywhere from 3 to 5 days on the ground, and then weeks to create a report and understanding the terrain of that area. With drones, you can do this in 2 days, 3 days. You can go out, you fly a couple grid patterns, which are called autonomous missions. The drone's going to take a picture every 1 to 3 seconds. You're going to end up with 150 to 200 images. You stitch that together, and you can basically extract all of this data for construction companies to make better decisions and be more efficient. So those were kind of some of the initial use cases for drones that we were applying the technology towards as a company. So we were building the business, and then what ended up happening is essentially that we kept running into the same problem. And that same problem was the regulation. really big executives and decision makers would say, hey guys, like, what are the regulations around drone flights? And we're kind of sitting there like, well, there really aren't any. And that's not a great answer when you're talking to executives, because they say, hey, number one, we don't want to be the scapegoat. This is too big of a risk. It's a huge liability. So we can't do this quite yet. So I said, okay, no problem. We went and got one of the initial first drone certifications, right? We were the 33rd company in the United States to get what was called a Section 333 exemption to be able to go fly drones commercially. And then, so that's great. Let's market this. We're legal. We're good to go. And then what we found is that, hey, you have to, one of the regulations was you'd have to fly within visual line of sight. You have to see the drone. Like, that seems kind of limiting. What if I have this 100-mile line of power poles that I want to inspect? You mean to tell me that I can only fly as far as I can see the drone physically? That doesn't make any sense. We don't want to do that. So, you know, have that happen to you about 100 times over of the same things. It's like, okay, what next? Because this isn't working anymore. So I figured I have to hear about this agency every single day. Why don't I go work for them? Why don't I try and have an impact and learn what's going on here? And the state of Nevada is one of 6 UAS test sites with the FAA. So applied for a job, got the job, ended up rising to number 2 in the company pretty quickly, and worked for the FAA for 2.5 years because I wanted to know and understand why this was happening. You know, why can't the FAA help support regulation and operational tempos to really build out an industry that's, at the end of the day, where the world's going, right? Drones are basically commonplace at this point. There are very few social hurdles for it to get over. Now, the spying and the privacy thing, that's never going to go away. But overall, social acceptance of drones has increased over the years. So I wanted to understand why this was happening and why the federal government and the FAA were having such a hard time wrapping their minds around this. And I learned pretty quickly. You know, they're a federal agency that moves very slow. They're a little bit behind in the curve. It's very hard for them to understand and grasp this paradigm shift in aviation, because this is something that the world's never seen before. Essentially, in the past 10 years, these little drones that are flying cameras and cell phones, buzzing around the air, doing different things. They didn't know how to wrap their minds around things flying below 100 feet of AGL. And so how are we going to manage and track and basically hold people accountable for the drones that they're flying? So everything that you see now, I was able to learn at a very early stage. So, you know, why did the FAA implement Part 107, right? Which is a test for commercial drone operations that you have to take in order to do that. What type of technologies is the FAA developing to be able to track drones, right? When are we going to have Amazon be able to drop off a package legally on our front porch, you know, 30 minutes after we hit the button for buy? All of these different use cases and why the industry wasn't being able to grow as quick as I thought it could. So over 2.5 years, I quickly understood why. And the FAA is still really kind of struggling to figure this out. They're definitely making steps and there is progress, but I realized quickly that at a federal agency, it was going to be hard to move a big boat. And the FAA is a big, slow moving boat rooted in tradition. So I had an opportunity to get back into the private world at a company called FLIR. FLIR is a large technology company that builds thermal cameras. So it can see heat distribution. You may have heard of them. A lot of manned helicopters, manned aviation has FLIR on board. Very long, well-known company. So I was fortunate enough to go over there and to run the commercial drone business. So basically, FLIR built drone payloads, camera payloads that would go on the bottom of drones that had thermal imaging capabilities. So, you know, search and rescue missions, responding to fire incidents, being able to inspect large-scale solar panels, being able to inspect transmission lines. All of these different things where thermal imaging from the ground is happening today, basically take that and put it in the air. So I was able to now go back into industry and understand the technologies that were being developed to help move the industry forward. So it was a really exciting time that I spent about 2 years there, helped develop products for the industry, helped grow the business, and ultimately just be. I was able to come back into private industry and be an evangelist for a technology that I believe in. Right, I no longer think that search and rescue teams are going to be jumping in a helicopter to go try and find somebody. I think they're going to be going out with 3 or 4 drones that are, $15,000 to $25,000 a piece, as opposed to putting up a helicopter, which is, there's all different types of cost estimates, but at the end of the day, using a helicopter at any point in time or a fixed wing aircraft is very expensive. So being able to work with all of the end users and understand why they wanted to use drone technology was really important, because this is the way the world is going. And there are going to be so many jobs and so many opportunities in this industry, because especially after the last year we've had in the world, year and a half, where every business on the planet has had to take a step back, think about how they're going to run their operations more efficiently. How are they going to spend less money? How are they going to take humans and repurpose them to do different jobs? Drones basically create that they are the tool for all of those problems. They're cheaper, they save time, they save people, all of these different reasons why drones are becoming such a big part of our day-to-day lives. It's going to continue to go that way. And so working at FLIR was an amazing opportunity to see both traditional manned aviation with big, expensive thermal pods on the front of helicopters and fixed wing aircraft, but also see how that could be shrunk down into a sensor that's about that big, that's going inside of a drone that can see thermal landscape and things like that. I worked there for about 2 years and had an opportunity to come work for a startup here in Las Vegas. I want to give a little bit of inspiration to all the younger students out here. Our founder and CEO's name is Blake Resnick. He's 21 years old today. I've known him for about 4 years now, back when I was working for the FAA. And so Blake is kind of a child genius. Graduated high school when he was 13. He went to Northwestern School of Engineering when he was 14, hated it, decided to leave, and he went and interned at McLaren Automotive in London. And then he interned at Tesla Automotive. And then he went to DJI, the world's biggest drone company, like I've been talking about, to intern there. And in parallel, started this company, BRINC Drones. And so I'm going to show you the drone that he built. But first, he started with a large scale 600-pound solar powered drone in a box concept. And this was when he was about 17 or 18. This is when we were building the physical border wall along the United States-Mexico border. And he basically thought to himself that makes no sense. That's not going to work. It's expensive. It's going to take forever. I'm going to build something that can do 24/7 surveillance. So he built a self-sustaining drone in a box concept that would be laid out every 50 miles along the border, give 24/7 surveillance of the border, pipe all that data back to Border Patrol, and you basically have a full 24/7 security along the border using drone technology. But all of the reasons that I was talking about earlier with the FAA, these are still regulatory problems. You still cannot fly beyond visual line of sight. You still cannot fly remote operations like that. So he kept going, getting bumped into the regulatory red tape. And at about the same time, the Mandalay Bay shootings happened here in Vegas on October 1st at the Route 91 Harvest Festival. And that was his motivation and inspiration to pivot the company and build something else. So Blake, and this is again back to talking when I first started, being fully committed to what you're doing. Blake is that. Now he's an incredible entrepreneur, but he cold called the Las Vegas SWAT lieutenant a couple of weeks after that event and said, "My name is Blake. I'm an engineer. I think that I can build you something that would have really, really helped you that night. Because think about it, they had to clear about 35 floors, and how many rooms are on each floor? A lot. So the operational problem there, they didn't know where he was shooting from, right? So they had to figure out by clearing every room at the Mandalay Bay. So Blake spent 6 months with Las Vegas SWAT. He went on 25 call outs. He would go to his garage, build a prototype, take it out on a mission. They would tear him apart, go back to the garage, make those changes, go back, do that 25 times over. And this is the product that he built. So this is called the Lemur. This is an indoor tactical drone that is built for clearing rooms. So instead of sending a 6-person armed SWAT team into a dangerous situation like a hostage situation or a barricade or an active shooter, now what happens is they use this to fly in and clear every room. And the way that they can do that, there's a couple of reasons. So right now, what SWAT teams and tactical teams do is they take large ground robots that are going to bust down the door. They're going to try and get in. They're going to try and go up the stairs. But the problem with ground robots is laundry baskets take them down. They can't get upstairs, and they're really, really slow. Okay. So now you use this. Okay. And what this does is, if a door is ajar, you can use these 2 front rods on the system to use the drone as a battering ram. Open the door. Or there is an accessory bay that you see on the bottom of our system. And we have 4 attachments. One of those attachments is a glass breaker. So we have a glass breaker that sits on the front of the drone and spins up to 30,000 RPM. It's tungsten carbide. It's the second hardest material on the planet, and basically acts like a spinning ninja star and will break glass. So now the drone will make entry, fly into the house. The camera system has built-in night vision, HD camera, all being flown via our controller. You're able to go into every single room, whether it's pitch black or not, flip on night vision, or if it's really, really dark, you can just put on the floodlight attachment. So on the bottom, we have a floodlight that will brighten up the scene. So you can also establish 2-way communication. So these are very sensitive microphones on the front right here. This is a loudspeaker on the bottom, and every drone comes with its own cell phone number. So just the way you'd make a cell phone call, you call the drone and you now have 2-way communication with a suspect. If the drone lands on its back, you would think mission over. Like with most drones, we have a turtle mode. So you flip a switch, reverse thrust the motors, flip back over, drone's operational again. Okay. Now, if we want to get really technical here, which I would assume some of you do, we don't use GPS on this drone. Every outdoor system uses GPS. Now, we use this LiDAR unit that you can see right here, but the pilot has to be a pretty good pilot. So we require training when you buy our system, and we only sell to law enforcement. But this downward facing LiDAR, because of the absence of GPS, is what gives you your altitude hold. So if you go into LiDAR mode, your drone will not move in the Y-axis. You'll get a little bit of drift left and right in the X-axis, but it's going to maintain altitude, right? So the reason this has been such a successful startup and company is because we're fixing a real world problem. We are in the middle of a time where police reform is required, right? People are asking for a new way for police to do their job. And so taking a big problem, trying to fix it, but having the humility to listen to the customer and try and build in features that they need is really, really important if you want to get into this industry, because it moves really, really fast. So everything on this system right here is built for indoor tactical operations. And I just want to use that as an example for all of you. Think about where you can fix a problem. And if aviation and aerospace is your passion, apply that passion to fixing a problem. That's what Blake's been able to do. Just to give you all an idea of how fast the drone industry is growing. Now, Blake's been working on this for about 3 years, but I was his first employee on December 1st. The company consisted of myself, Blake, one lemur, and a basic website. Today, we have a 7,000 square foot facility in Vegas. We have about 45 employees. We've raised about $30 million from investors and are going to have a headcount of probably 100 people in the next 6 to 9 months. And we've sold these to international military, foreign militaries, dozens and dozens of SWAT teams in the US and Canada. And the business is growing like crazy. So we are actively hiring technicians, assembly, engineers, pilots, you name it. So there's so many ways you can get into this industry. I just want to keep an open mind, think about, what's the product, what problem is that product solving, and ultimately who's building it. Those are going to be kind of important guiding principles for if you want to get into this space, because there are just a world of opportunities that drones can fill, and drones can step into. So I think I'm up on my time, but that's a little bit of a background on my journey into current day, and the way the drone industry is evolving.
Wow, Brett, that's a lot. And you are definitely out of time. You have to leave within like 30 seconds. So thank you. We're going to have to bring you back.
3 minutes over. So.
Yeah. Quick question though. You're saying that their jobs are on the rise. How do candidates find these jobs? Is it by meeting you, or are there like websites? Who can they talk to find these jobs?
Yeah, good question. LinkedIn is where all jobs posting in our industry is going to live. Company websites, just doing your research. There are drone companies, both software and hardware, popping up every single day. And not just in San Francisco anymore. They're starting to pop up kind of all over the place. For a long time there, if you were a drone company, you were going to be in Silicon Valley, period, end of story. Well, manufacturing in Silicon Valley is not exactly an easy thing to do. A lot of software companies for a reason, smaller footprint, less expensive, but there are opportunities everywhere. And so if you like software, there's a million companies that you can look at to go do all sorts of different projects in the software world. Hardware is the same. A lot of camera manufacturers, a lot of drone manufacturers, a lot of ground control station manufacturers. LinkedIn and just doing your homework and your due diligence on research.
Perfect. All right, we're definitely out of time with you. Thank you so much, and we'll definitely be talking to you soon. I know it. So Brett, thank you so much.
Please feel free to reach out. Thanks for having me.
You got it. Thanks.